the DPS Weaver. Let's begin by looking at the build quickly. Damage percentage and power stacking is what allows Weaver to be so destructive, and that's why running a proper build is so important here. So even though I do typically like to run a fairly glass cannon build without any vitality or toughness, I do lately feel like the sweet spot for DPS Weaver might be somewhere around 14,000 vitality with no toughness or healing power. And this can be easily achieved by selecting the Master's Fortitude trait within the Weaver trait line, and using food or gear to gain the rest. So keep in mind that, as I've said before, you shouldn't have too much of a problem sustaining on a fully glass Weaver if you utilize good positioning and mobility skills effectively. The extra 2000 vitality is something I just like to run to avoid being one-shotted. If you'd like to run the Superior Elements trait, this is a good choice as well. The idea is that you do not want to tank up to avoid damage. You want to avoid damage by moving around effectively. So a little bit of vitality is okay. You don't want toughness, that's a waste. But a little bit of vitality is okay. You just don't need it. As far as trait lines go, we will of course be running Fire, Air, and Weaver. And in terms of skills, I highly recommend that you run Ether Renewal for a reliable Condi Cleanse, and Twist of Fate for reliable Stun Break and Super Speed. The rest is optional, but a few good picks would be Lightning Flash, Arcane Shield, Arcane Wave, and Arcane Power. I like to use Arcane Power whenever I use a Meteor Shower. Arcane Wave is very good for just adding to your DPS, especially in between like a tuning to a different element or something like that. Arcane Shield and Lightning Flash are more defensive. I like to run those if I'm just really having a hard time with a particular group. Lightning Flash is just a huge mobility increase, and you could actually argue that you get more DPS by running Lightning Flash just because it allows you to move around the battlefield a bit more efficiently. I also prefer to use Conjure Fiery Greatsword for its DPS boost and mobility skills. In terms of the rotations you'll be using, it will be based on the situation you are faced with. Kind of an obvious statement, but it really can't be understated that your rotation will rarely be the same, and you may have to stop your ideal rotation halfway through and, for example, cast Conjure Fiery Greatsword because maybe the enemy has got too close and you need mobility. And basically the principle here is that a Weaver that does not die will always do more damage, so don't be afraid to use skills such as these in a defensive manner. One rotation that I love to repeat is the Earth-Water dual skill followed by Fire-Earth dual skill, Lava Font, Meteor Shower, and then the Air Attunement skills. You may notice throughout this video that whenever I'm uncertain of what the enemy is going to do next, I tend to go for the Fire-Air, Air-Fire rotations first. And these are your most reliable skills, but be sure to target enemies before using Air skill 2, as missing that skill will result in a DPS decrease. Another note about Air Attunement skills is that the Fire-Air dual skill takes a long time to travel to the enemy, so always try to cast this skill before anything else. Another thing to keep in mind is how much time you have. If the enemy Zerg is at about 1200 range, try to put your dual skills in Lava Font about 1 second in front of where the front line is, and then follow up with a Meteor Shower or Air Attunement just in front of your own Zerg. Another trick you could use is to fully attune to Earth about 8 seconds before the enemy is within range, switch to Fire Earth and begin casting with the resulting 4 seconds of the 10% damage increase. And while it's best to use Meteor Shower only after fully attuning to Fire for the damage boost, if you need to cast Meteor but don't have enough time to fully attune, at least switch to Fire after you've begun casting Meteor Shower. Simply being in Fire Attunement will provide a damage and power increase. Using a DPS meter such as Arc DPS is an effective way to gauge your competency within a DPS role. As a Weaver, killing shit is pretty much the only thing you're good for. It's therefore better for you and everyone around you if you can use a DPS meter as a reference, while you learn how to optimize your DPS. This can't be taught. You have to use your meter as feedback for your gameplay and try to change your behavior in a way that will increase your DPS. if you're serious about it, you know, like if you take it a little more casual, I guess it doesn't really matter, but like the concept is why not, right? Why not? Like why couldn't you try to maximize your gameplay if you could? And when it comes to positioning, you want to pay enough attention to the enemy so that you can tell when they are about to focus you and gank the shit out of you, or if you practically don't exist to them. And this is pretty crucial because sometimes when I notice the enemy does not even see me despite being right next to their front line, this is when I lay down massive damage because I'm within their blind spot. They're focusing damage somewhere else and I can practically stand right next to them laying down damage. You also want to try to imagine angles to the best of your ability, as in, what is your angle relative to the enemy? Are they likely to target you where you are? Can you target them? Would it be best to hug the wall as you move around a corridor or a tight space? Would it be best to stay close to your zerg for protection? These are things that you will have to consider, and that over time you will have a better idea of gauging. And you know, if you've been playing World v World for a while, you already have a pretty good idea about those things. You have to be a little extra cautious on Weaver, obviously, because you're going to be a little more glassy. If you find you're struggling to use skills effectively, chances are that your issue has something to do with finger dexterity and finger independence. That might sound like it's straight out of a guitar tutorial video, but it's actually very relevant when it comes down to the game. Practice using your skills in slow motion and gradually increase speed while paying close attention to each finger on your hand, independently selecting skills. Keep in mind you will have a hard time doing this if you're using a suboptimal keybind set up. Try to set up your keybinds in a way that allows you to use your skills sort of like a piano. Some skills will require you to make some funky hand movements, but that's okay. You will get used to it. Do not handicap yourself at step 1 by using shitty keybinds. You know, like if you find that it's difficult, or oh no, I have to move my finger all the way over here. Maybe move the key, or maybe you do have to do that. You know, maybe it is kind of an awkward hand movement, but either way, it needs to be something that you can do. Like I have all of my keybinds set up in a way that I barely even move my hand, and I can hit everything because I've set it up that way. And so you need to do something like that. You don't need to do what I do exactly, but something like that. Effective movement is also pretty crucial. You can practice effective movement simply by following a commander tag and reacting to their movement as quickly as you can. See how close you can stay to their tag. Try using your left mouse button to look around as you use your strafe left and strafe right keybinds to move. Doing this is a pretty big game changer, actually. Like, I feel like it doesn't really get the recognition it deserves. So again, to reiterate, if you use the left mouse key so that you can move around, you can look, and then you use whatever key it is that you found it to. I think by default it's like W and D. I've set mine to Q and E because I think that's a little more efficient. So my movement keys are WASD, pretty standard, and then Q and E move my character left and right. And if you just look around with the left mouse button and use that Q and E or whatever the strafe key you have to move, yeah, it's a little bit slow, but you'd be surprised how effective that actually is. Especially if you're trying to look at something and move and react at the same time. It accomplishes multiple things at once. That's why I do it.